So, guess what I learned as I was scrolling through TikTok this morning? I learned about the Saltwater Underground Railroad. Yeah. Now, this railroad was like the Underground Railroad. However, instead of going north into Canada, it went south into the British controlled Bahamas. Let's talk about it. Do you remember our conversation about Florida being a slave haven? Well, quick recap. To make life difficult for Britain, Spain told enslaved people, hey, come to Florida, be an indentured servant for a few years, become a Catholic, and we will set you free. So enslaved people made their way to Spanish Florida. They became indentured servants. They became Catholic, and they were set free, driving Georgia and especially South Carolina crazy. Yeah. But eventually, the United States would obtain Florida through the 1819 Adams-Onis Treaty. And then Florida would become an organized territory of the United States in 1821, eventually entering the United States in 1845 as a slave state. Now, Black people who had been free all this time saw the writing on the wall and were like, we're out of here. Hundreds of Black people, hundreds of Black Seminoles and fugitive slaves escaped in the early 19th century from Cape Florida to the British controlled Bahamas. And not long after, enslaved people from Alabama, Georgia, and the Carolinas would join them on the trek to freedom on the Saltwater Railroad. The Saltwater Underground was a loose network of places and people that assisted enslaved Black people in their quest for freedom. And like we said, instead of going north, it went south, and it operated between about 1821 and 1861, and it was a coastal escape route followed by fugitive slaves into the British-controlled Bahamas, like we discussed. Now, enslaved people from southern slave states sought refuge on South Florida's beaches. Why the Bahamas? Well, funny story. The British did what Spain did. Because it was British controlled, Britain in 1825 says that anybody who traveled to British grounds, regardless of their prior status, was free. They didn't say that you had to be an indentured servant. They didn't say you had to convert to, Catholicism, or that you had to be a Protestant. Nope, they just said, come one, come all. If you traveled to British grounds, regardless of your prior status, you were free. So by the 1830s, an estimated 6,000 enslaved people had escaped to the islands. In August 1834, slavery was abolished throughout all British territories, including the Bahamas. And once in the Bahamas, now formerly enslaved people could assimilate into communities alongside families of earlier fugitives. Many of their families had gone before them, so they were at home. And now they were free. Now they could marry, own land, and pursue an education and have simple, basic human rights that were inconceivable for enslaved human beings in the antebellum South. The Saltwater Underground Railroad came to an end in 1825 when the Cape Florida Lighthouse was completed. And that's because it provided light at night, which made it difficult for enslaved people to escape. The Cape Florida Lighthouse is the oldest standing structure in Miami-Dade County. Fun fact, my entire family, minus the grandkids, which is my daughter and most of her cousins, were born in Miami-Dade County.